Won't you lend your lungs to me? Mine are collapsing. Plant my feet and bitterly breathe up the time that's passed. Breath I'll take and breath I'll give. Pray the day's not poised. Stand among the ones that live in lonely indecision.
Okay, good afternoon, James.
Good afternoon, Lynn.
Today is February 27th, and we're taping episode 29. Last week you were with the myth of the 20th century. Actually, I think it might be 2 weeks ago now, and it'll be probably a month before everybody hears this. But it was their episode on the LA riots, and you talked about what it was like maybe for these 4 cops to try to subdue Rodney King with their batons. And I think people want to hear more about stick fighting.
Okay. Well, to review the basic question with subduing a big man with a baton, I've interviewed 3 cops that have used batons on people. And the only guy that successfully subdued his man with a baton rather than breaking the baton was a really big guy, Big Dave. He was a 6'4", 230-pound man. Okay. You subdue people with a baton by hitting him on top of the head and making a bloody mess out of things. That doesn't work if he's a psycho. Or by hitting him on the collarbone, and it feels like they're being electrocuted. It's like getting tased.
It's a big nerve there.
Right, but you have to be taller than they are to do that. To be able to successfully do that. And you have to know how to use a stick like a competitive stick fighter would, and no cop knows how to do that. None of them are trained like that. It takes a lot of specific training. It's not an easy weapon to do. In the hands of police, batons have always been weapons for punishment. And in some places they're still used for judicial punishments. This is about punishment. It's about social control. Punishing you through the infliction of pain. It's not a tool that you can use to control somebody with. You can use it to kill somebody with. I think I mentioned on there, it would take me about 3 seconds to kill a goon like Rodney King with a stick that was only a half-inch stick.
All right. Because
I know how hard I can hit, and I know where to hit him, and I'm really good at cleaving the side of the head with a stick. I can do it with an inside chop. So even if the guy reads it, that's how I've won most of my stick fights, is with an inside chop that goes inside another stroke and would go inside the person's defensive hand. You can only do that if you can keep elbow, body continuity, and pivot underneath the stroke or travel with the stroke. These are things that take hundreds of hours practicing on a bag and in sparring to learn how to do. But if you hit the side of the head with your stick and your flexor tendons are properly conditioned. You need the flexor tendons really of a carpenter. The only guy I knew that could hit hard with a stick right out of the gate was Big Ron. He was a carpenter. The guy had used a hammer all of his life. So even then, you have to hit the side of the head. Unless you're a tall guy and he's not real muscular and you come down on his shoulder. So if the guy's not a big beefy guy, which Rodney King was, and you're taller than him, you can come right down between the neck and the ball of the shoulder, and you're going to jam this cluster of nerves that goes down your arm to your fingers between the bone and a momentary shock. I've been knocked out that way a few times, and it is like getting electrocuted because I've been electrocuted also. But that was in a grocery store. This power stroke, if you land it to the side of the head, there's a video. Maybe you can link it on this somehow, Lynn. The video of Charles and I hitting a bag.
I don't think I've seen it off the top of my head, but I'll look for it.
I'll send it to you, okay?
Okay.
And if you see that and you see us hitting the bag with the harder strokes, the inside chop I'm talking about is the first stroke I demonstrate when I'm up there, and it's done off of a lunge, and it's really hard to stop. And it's not the most powerful stroke, but that'll shatter the side of even a thick human skull. I've used that stroke to hit guys that had helmets on and guys who had fencing masks on and have knocked them out with it. Okay.
Even through the helmet.
Right. And we've destroyed, and Charles has destroyed some of the fencing masks I was wearing, concussing me with these things. There was many times that Charles and I have hit each other in the side of the head in such a way that it would have killed the other guy if we weren't wearing a fencing mask.
Wow.
Okay. But in this case, the one time he knocked me out with a spinning back fist. hit me in the temple with the butt of the stick. That folded in the whole fencing mask, and I had a real bad concussion that lasted for a couple of weeks. And although I didn't stop fighting, I kept on going through that round, but I was technically knocked out. I was just kind of muddling through. He didn't know how bad I was hurt. But if you did that to a person, it's known to be deadly. A strike to the side of the head, particularly of anybody that's prone, is known to be deadly. That's just going to get you in huge trouble. I've had to practice. Half the practice I do in a bag is practicing not hitting the side of the head. Now, since I don't compete in stick fighting, and my only time I would use an extension weapon would be to defend myself against the martyred children of the state. And I can't hit the side of the head because then I'm going to end up with a dead hood rat on my hands, and I'm going to be the next, Dylan Roof or George Zimmerman. I practice hand, shoulder, and leg shots, which I was very good at anyhow in competitive stick fighting. But again, you can't submit a guy like that if he's strong and tough. And if he's
on all kinds of drugs.
Right, and if he's under the influence, forget it. But he doesn't even have to be under the influence. He could just be strong and tough.
I've seen videos recently of European cops subduing rioters, and that it could be like a half a dozen cops in full riot gear, and they have these real long sticks, but they do just whack over the head, like you said at first. They just smack you over the head, and the rioters don't like it. They tend to disperse. But it's not stick fighting like what you do.
If you're trying to deal with a guy like Rodney King,
he
was a big, strong, tough guy.
Yeah.
That's again, it's a punishment will subdue the sissies of the world, but not people that are real hard cases. So how do you mechanically subdue somebody with a stick? Comes down to choking them with it.
Oh.
But you can't choke somebody with a stick unless I know a couple of guys that could have probably choked out Rodney King with a stick, but they could have done it without the stick. Okay, it might be a question of skill. That might be how you get your choke in, or it might be a question of your dominance in the situation. I have been taken out by a stick choke by a guy that was smaller than me, but he was stronger, and the guy placed third in Naga grappling tournaments. The guy's a professional level grappler. As soon as he got his hands on me, I had no chance whatsoever. And the other guy that choked me out with a stick, I was a lightweight, he was a middleweight, and he was the second best guy in the world. And I'm just some guy from Baltimore that had a lot of stick fights, and he's already beating the piss out of me. And I can't necessarily say it was the stick across my throat that got me to stop, because he also had his knee in my solar plexus, and he was using my stick to choke me out because he had broken his stick on me.
Oh my God!
While he was beating me up, I mean, he bent the main bar on my. I had a hockey helmet, the kind that they use for the rodeo competition. He bent the main bar, not the little crossbars, like the main bar. He bent it to you and broke his stick. Wow. So it's stopping somebody that's muscular and determined and on the influence with a blunt weapon is not going to happen unless you can kill them. But now, when you hit somebody on the side of the head, you basically already have an opening. Think of a tank. A tank's got sloped armor on the front that's thick. It's thick and it's sloped. On the side, it's usually got flat panels, so the other tankers want to hit it from the side, and it's thinner. So the real modern tanks, they put reactive armor on the outside of that because they know it's such a dangerous spot. Well, your head's the same way. Your head's basically designed to take a blunt force blow above your eyes. Mm. That's what it's designed for, up to the crown of your head. On the side, you have your hearing and your balance apparatus, so you're much more likely to get your brain compromised by a lateral stroke to the side of the head, or a diagonal stroke, than getting hit on top of the head, which is just going to split your scalp open on top of your thick bone up there on the crown.
It does cause a lot of bleeding, I know.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. If you're trying to subdue the guy and you got to handcuff him, and you're working in a place like Baltimore where something like 30% of the hood rats have HIV. I mean, we actually like a third. Yeah, something like a third of black dudes in Baltimore City have HIV.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big test in amateur boxing. A lot of guys don't go that far in amateur boxing. Yeah, it's that big. You want to cause a lot of blood? That's ridiculous. You know, you could get blood spatter back in your eyes and your mouth and your nose when you're hitting this guy. So it's not a law enforcement option. The leg option, I've taken ridiculous amounts of stick strokes to my legs. It's really hard to break the leg. I could take 3 full power strokes to the kneecap with a 3/4 inch stick and continued to fight. It's a lot harder to damage the knee than you think. It's a lot harder to get access to the knee than people think. And the thigh sustains very well. So when you're using a stick to defend yourself, you really just want to break their hands and their elbows. If you can break a hand and then you can get them to pull their hands back and then you can hit their elbow. The elbow doesn't hold up nearly as long as the knee does. And you do it when you're moving away from them. If it's a do or die situation, you've got guys with knives, well, then you just hit them in the side of the head and you kill them. And that's what a stick was as a weapon of war. You know, this is the way you killed somebody. That ear hole, that's a pre-existing hole, and your stick is the can opener, and the skull is the can, and that's the tab. The ear is the tab. Okay, so it just shatters out from there. You can turn the side of that head into as many as 8 pieces. A very good friend of mine named Bradley Noggle was in a bar in Texas, and he was just walking through to go to the bathroom, said howdy to the 3 dudes playing pool. One guy looked at him, put his pool cue in a corner pocket, snapped it off, and then hit Bradley in the side of the head with the heavy end of the pool cue, which is technically a club. He went outside, and he was sitting over top of this ditch trying to get his wits together, and female barmaid came out and said, "You have to leave because they're going to dump you out in the desert." She said, "I know these guys, and they do this, and they dump the guy out in the desert." So he drove himself home. He went to sleep. His wife chewed him out for bleeding all over the bed. Eventually, I think his mother came over or something and saw what kind of shape he was in, and they took him to the hospital. The doctor couldn't believe he was alive. The only reason why he was alive is the skull was so badly shattered, and I think his skull was in 8 pieces, that the brain, the swelling of the brain, didn't kill him because it wasn't swelling against a solid skull. And he survived this. It was like a miraculous case that he survived this thing. So that's the kind of damage that can happen. And that was one hit.
Yeah.
By a dude not even trained. That's just a guy that probably works construction for a living. He's got strong forearm muscles. Bam. And he shattered that. But you got to understand, the pool cue's weighted with a piece of metal at the end. It's technically a club. It's more dangerous once you break it off than a cop's baton is.
Yeah.
Okay. It depends on what type of wood you're striking somebody with. I can tell you, probably the nastiest thing you could hit somebody with that is called a stick. Win Thompson's company, Cold Steel, makes this thing. It's a polyethylene or polypropylene training stick. It's not a stick. It's this unbreakable plastic. Corey and I sparred with these things one time. We said never again. We're like, no. You know, we've sparred with oak and with ash before. No, I'm not going to spar with these things again because they have flex to them. So this thing is harder to break than oak. It's as hard as oak, and it flexes. If you get enough velocity behind it, it's nasty. I think it's cut to like a 31-inch length. That would be a deadly stick fight. As far as the cops using batons, it's just never going to go down well unless they've got a sissy that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So I guess it's good for protesters because by definition, protesters are basically all pussy.
And it's more visible, and they're just trying to get them to disperse. I don't think they even care about arresting most of the time. They just want to get the protesters out of the street.
Right. So a big dude like Rodney King, you're better off just punching him in the chin. If you got a guy that can box, big guys like that are actually pretty easy to knock out if you're a regular sized dude, because you can get full access to cutting off the messages from his walnut sized brain down to his giant muscles by hitting the chin. Okay. Where when you hit the side of the head, you got all that knucklehead between the stroke. Really, you get a lot more force if I left hook somebody, even though I'm not a good hooker, in the chin, I'll do more damage to their neurosystem than if I hit them in the side of the head with a stick. But the side of the head's more lethal. You still have to worry about the guy falling and hitting the side of his head on the concrete.
Yeah.
Or pavement, and that could kill him. The only good solution is to choke, and that's basically illegal.
Right. Well, moving away from the
okay.
the cops.
Sorry.
No.
Sorry. Hey guys, I'm doing this as a video Skype with Lynn, and she just looked like she was about ready to hurl for that last couple of minutes. So I apologize, young lady. I just kind of got carried away with the technicalities.
No, that's fine. I'm fine. I'm composed myself. I think the next thing I want to do is I have all these pictures of you. I think a lot of these come out of modern agonistics, and some of them come from Winter of a Fighting Life, and some I don't know where they come from. Well, this one is on the cover, I think, of Twerps, Goons, and Meat Shields. You know which one I'm talking about? Whose leg is that?
That's Charles's thigh.
Okay, I'll describe the picture for the audience. A man's leg takes up most of the screen. He's bent at the knee, and he's showing his inner thigh, and you can see a welt diagonally across the length of his thigh, and then the bruising extends from just above the knee to the end of the frame, which is all the way up the leg. It looks pretty bad.
That was at least 5 power strokes.
Yeah, there's more than one welt. That's true. There's one primary welt, but I can count probably 2 or 3 more.
That was an experimental combat, which is on film, but you're never going to see it because Charles owns the film, and he's not going to let anybody see it.
Aww.
Okay.
So who is responsible for that? Is that you did that?
This was supposed to be a drunken agon. We were supposed to get drunk and fight like we were in Valhalla.
I read that one.
But Eric's wife vetoed it. So we thought, okay, we could do team sober versus team inebriation. So Corey and I were going to be team inebriation against Charles and Eric, team sober.
Okay.
Corey, this was the 5th of July. On the 4th of July, Corey drank a whole keg of beer, so the big man didn't show up.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, Corey didn't even show up? I was going to say he could absorb a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, but he drank even more than his. He's half Norse, half Norwegian, half Irish, and he drank even more beer than he could handle the next day.
He's not half. So I don't think he's half and half. I think he's like a whole Norwegian and a whole Irishman together.
Well, yeah, right. Actually, he's bigger than Charles and me put together. So, at the time, Corey was 395.
Oh man.
At 6'5". So I thought we were going to crush these guys in a drunken fight, but he doesn't show up.
Oh.
So what we decided to do is, since Eric was in his 2nd year of stick fighting, Charles was in his 10th year, and I was in my 18th year, that we would prorate it. We would track skill degradation. We knew how we panned out. Charles and I had a fight previous, a couple months previous to that, and I'd done okay with him, but he decisively beat me on points. Okay, so we knew Charles was the best guy, but I was kind of the hardest guy to pin down and beat because I had a lot more experience. And Eric was a new guy who we beat up on. We decided, since Eric was not allowed to fight drunk, and his wife was there supervising this, that he would be sober, and he would be the people take the placebo, right? He
Control.
would the control group, and then Charles, with the intermediate level of experience, would just get buzzed.
Okay.
And I would get drunk before we started, and we had supervisors. A guy named Mike Nichols, who gave his house over for this. He had his whole Jim Frederick's whole karate school. All their black belts came over, and they made a human ring so we wouldn't fall into the grill or the brick garden.
Wow.
Because they were grilling chicken while this was going on. And so we had safety guys there and everything. And we started drinking. At a certain point, somebody was like, well, when are we going to see a fight? And Mike handed me a pint of Jameson, and I downed half of it. And I'd already had a couple of rum and cokes, and I had a shot of something else, and I had a few beers. and AJ was there. She was my escort, and she said, "Oh my God!" And Mike looked at me and he grabbed me by the shoulders and he said, "It's on. Get out there and fight," because he thought everybody was at the right level. So we got out there, and I did horrible in the knife fighting. I mean, I was drunk. I was staggering drunk. I did horrible in the knife fighting. Arik did the best in knife fighting. He improved against Charles and defeated me, and Charles just toyed with me and just sliced and diced me. Then we went to stick fighting, and I beat their young asses. I beat them like redheaded stepchildren. It was not even funny. There were some guys, the guys that fight, the SCA guys, Society for Creative Anachronism, came up to show us some of their weapons. And they were watching to see if they wanted to do anything with us. And by the time they got done seeing me fight these two guys with sticks, we were doing batons, double batons, stick, double stick, stick and baton. These guys just like drifted away. They didn't even want to be anywhere around us. But Charles had a thing. He knew I'll go for a leg if you hang it out there, and I was drunk. So I knew he was setting me up for a headshot. He was going to knock me out. But I was so relaxed, I had no hesitation. I'm a guy that tends to overthink things when I fight. So I turned out with a stick to be a better stick fighter than I am sober. Him being buzzed, it was enough to mess up his really steel trap timing. So he would hang that leg out there, and I would get the leg, and he would not get the headshot. And now, this is Charles, 175 pounds, and I'm hitting him so hard, people are about to get sick just watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that, and he's not even wincing. Yeah, I saw in the video, he's actually hanging it out there for me and giving it to me again, and that he's going to get my head and I'm not going to get his leg. And like 5 times in a row, I get it. And then finally, after one of the shots, he just folds up. His leg folds up underneath of him, and he calls him out. I do remember this one part where Arik was on his knees, and he was looking up at me, and he said, "I've been training for 2 years, and you're old, and you're small, and you're drunk, but you're so evil, I still can't lay a stick on you, and you beat me up, and it's not fair. It's not fair." And then I go to sit down on a chair, and I miss the chair, and I like fall against the garage. Okay, and AJ helps me up, and then she tells me, she said, "You owe some people an apology." I was like, what's the matter? All of a sudden, I started to sober up. I was so drunk, mind you, that I was still drunk 12 hours later at David Wumst's party, and I didn't drink anymore.
Wow.
Okay, I mean, I felt drunk at like 1 o'clock in the morning and woke up sober, and I didn't have a hangover, by the way. She said, "Look," she said, "since you got drunk and you started stick fighting," she said, "you've only done 2 things." She said, "You have beat up Charles and Arik, and you have stared at Arik's wife." And she said, "You haven't said a whole lot other than that she's beautiful. You haven't been rude." She said, "But the way you're looking at her like like an animal looking at meat." So she said, "You deserve an apology." So they were practicing, like, because she was part of the group. She didn't fight because she was a girl, but she did the training. And I went over and I apologized to both of them. And actually, Arik told me, he said, he calls me Jay. He said, "That's all right, Jay." He said, "It was actually part of the plan." He said, "It was no secret that you have an eye for the ladies and you have a hard time not looking around. And, we knew that, and we kind of thought that it was going to get you off your game." He said, "I didn't count on this turning into a Neanderthal mating ritual."
Perfect.
So that's it's kind of the story behind that bruised leg. There's 5 hours of film of us fighting and drinking out there somewhere. Nobody other than Charles. Charles might make me watch it while I'm on my deathbed or something. I don't know. He just thought it looked embarrassing for the sport because I was literally staggering.
That's probably fair. It doesn't cover the sport and glory to have men getting drunk and beating each other, I guess. Is that sportsmanship? I don't know.
Apparently, even though I was staggering the whole time I was fighting, my technique with the stick was fine. I was a stick fighter when I was drunk, but knife fighting, I was just a bag of meat to get cut up. So it tells you something about how easy it is to shank drunk dudes while they're beating you up behind the bar.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That was good. I had read about the drunken Agon, but I had never heard you tell it. So that was good. Thank you. Okay. I have also a set of pictures here, probably 4 or 5 pictures of you standing in a room next to a white wall, and just bruises all over. We've got your elbow, your wrist, your back welts from the stick, your back of your arm. Okay, so what happened here?
Okay, there's the massive tricep bruise where you can see the fine picture of my sweaty underarm hair, right?
Well, no, this is different. I think
it's different than that.
This is different. Yeah, I have a set of pictures. This is your right elbow. Well, why don't you tell us about
could you
giant...
hold it up to the screen so I can see it?
No, it's in the screen.
No, I can't. Oh, okay. Okay, so you can actually do 2 things on your computer at one time. I'm sorry. I would have to hold up a book and look at it.
Okay, but all right. The one you're talking about is from Winter of a Fighting Life, and you're standing there with your elbow up next to your head.
Is that against the same wall, the same white wall?
I don't know.
Okay. Because that was taken in the old townhome that I rented in Greyhaven.
Yeah, because the one with the giant tricep bruise, you're younger, I think, than you are in the other set.
Okay, so we can back up to the other one because I know where it was now.
Okay. So we have a set.
2 bruises on the back.
There's the right elbow. There's your right wrist. It's got a little circle drawn in pen. Yeah, at least 3 or 4 welts on the left side of your back, 3 or 4 on the right side. I put these in the slideshows. And then your left arm is all bruised up on the forearm. Okay,
so this was from a stick and dagger sparring session with Charles, right when he really started to click, and he was this was after the Drunken Agon. This is in 2015, and he's definitely dominating me in the sparring. At this point, nobody else in our group can really do much with me in a stick fight, and then he's beating the piss out of me, and he's just toying with all of them. Okay, so he's really in his stride, and the worst bruise there's a bruise at the base of my thumb that I had circled on my right hand. He caught me with a redondo, with the tip of his stick coming down from over his head as I was doing a reverse lunge back after a missed stab, and my glove opened up, and he hit me right on that nerve at the base of the thumb, unprotected. All I had on was my batting glove under that, and that actually caused me to have to fight left-handed, and then I really got hammered. The bruises on the left forearm came from me trying to fight left-handed with a stick. Okay, the bruises on the right elbow, I pretty well had his head dialed in. He's always feared going against me for that because I can sink that chop in pretty good against the side of the head and sometimes combine it with a stick disarm. So what he did is he figured out how to draw that. He studied my footwork, and he would draw me in for that shot after he threw a forehand, and then he would come up with a rising stroke and smack me between the 2 elbow bones while I was coming in with a forehand. And that hurt. That was some sick pain. He also smacked me on both of my knees during this session. And you can also see there's a couple of bruises along my ribs on the back where I tried to stab him when I had the dagger in my left hand, and he did a pass cut against my dagger hand, and then he did a forehand slash across my ribs with one, and the one that's just a short bruise is the one that really hurt. That knocked the wind out of that lung because he did a stick dump on my back right there and just put a bruise on a small part of that one rib, but actually knocked the shockwave knocked the wind out of that lung. So I remember that sparring session. That white wall was out at my sister and mother's place out in rarefied Harford County where the White Rabbits run.
That set of pictures is in Modern Agonistics, but I will also include it on the slideshow for the YouTube viewers. All right, then we can go to the Winter of a Fighting Life, which you mentioned that you were thinking of initially. You've got your elbow up. Let's see, it's your. I
remember that fight.
It's your right arm.
It's my right elbow.
Yeah.
That was from 2 different fights. And I actually did this with a certain amount of armor on. You could see a real clean ending of the bruise down by the elbow. I had an elbow pad on.
End up cutting the spread of blood, I guess.
I also had a lacrosse clavicle protector on because we were fighting with heavy weapons. We were fighting with waxwood and oak swords, and my sparring partner at the time, Charles, had a flail that I made out of an arnis stick with 3 chains attached to the end of the arnis stick, and the chains were laced to 3 wiffle balls that were filled up with pennies and then duct taped over top. And we started out our session with a sword and dagger, and at this time we had used kendo sticks, and they always broke 6 inches from the top at the foible. So what we did is we took our kendo sticks, we shortened them to that length, and then we taped them with a lot of duct tape and electrical tape, which turned them into octagon clubs. It made them very dangerous. It was now worse than getting hit with an oak bokken, getting hit with this taped up shinai, which is the Japanese word for a kendo stick. I missed a forehand, and since Chuck is left-handed, he was good at clipping the tricep when you missed. If you're going against a right-hand guy and you miss your forehand and he's throwing a forehand, he's going to stripe the front of your shoulder up. He's going to hit your bicep. He's going to hit the brachial muscle that's between your bicep and your tricep on the side of the arm. I even have calcium deposits on my stick arm right there. I have like a lump of extra bone that's my doctor told me eventually if I did enough stick fighting that I would actually have this type of bone that the body grows as a result of all this trauma between the muscles and the skin all the way down the forearm. But I never made it to 1,000 fights, so that didn't happen. So I don't get to be Wizard Man or Swamp Thing. So that sucks. I only got this one chunk of that stuff. But instead of the counter to your missed forehand being his forehand plowing across your bicep and shoulder, since he's left-handed, his counter is ripping into your tricep, which is much more damaging because your tricep's more of your arm, and it puts more into your stroke than the bicep does because your follow through when you hit somebody, you're following through with a tricep press, and then only at the very end are you assisting with the bicep. Then after that bout, he won that bout. Then we did Thrax versus Flagellarius because we were doing the gladiatorial stuff at the time. He had a shield and a flail, and I had a little punch shield and a little curved cutlass, and he hit me in that same spot with those 3 balls, wiffle balls filled with pennies and duct tape over. And he knocked me out in that fight. There's a photo in my private collection of me on my hands and knees trying to get up with him still over top of me. And he literally knocked me down with that stroke because it was just a lot of force. He was a big, strong guy. And I was a twerp then. I was like 150 pounds.
Another one from the Winter of a Fighting Life collection. You are standing against the white wall. You're wearing a green tank top and holding this wooden sword, and you have a big bruise on your bicep.
Okay, that's a bruise inflicted on me by Chuck with that wooden sword. That is an oak wakizashi, which is the sidearm to the oak bokken. So that's wakizashi means sidearm in Japanese. And that's what that does. It's a handy little weapon. And then there's another picture where I'm holding my arm out, correct?
Yes.
And there's a double bruise along my shoulder?
Yeah. You look like a hood rat there, by the way. You've got the bandana tied around your, like, down your eyebrows. Yeah,
I was a white trash hood rat. Yeah. Although I had 2 Confederate rags that I used to wear sometimes when I went to work in Baltimore City when I was particularly pissed off at the world and wanted a chance to stab somebody. But nobody ever took me up on it. When I wanted to piss off the white boys, I'd wear the American Indian bandanas. When I wanted to piss off the black boys, I'd wear the Confederate bandanas. What that picture was illustrating is that was one stroke, but it was a slash. That's 2 distinctly separate bruises from one lateral stroke. And
it looks like a butterfly or an ink blot or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a demonstration. When a real pro hits you on like a bigger muscle, those strokes on Charles's leg, I just forced a channel through his flesh with that stick. And you got a solid bruise going all the way down. But when you're hitting something like a shoulder, that slash isn't just plowing through a thick bunch of flesh. It's starting to hit bone underneath of the muscle, and it starts to bounce. But even so, if you keep the slash on, instead of just smashing the dude, you end up getting a double hit on him, and your weapon clears through, and then you can hit him with the backhand. So that's why I put that illustration in.
Here's another one that I know is more recent, and I think you're proud of it. and rightly so. It's this young man in Pennsylvania who's just got dozens and dozens of welts. Not just welts. These are like open bleeding, you broke the skin on these.
Fractured 2 of those ribs, too.
2 ribs.
Yeah. That was Sean, or Arias, okay, who's he's the main guy that I'm coaching. He coaches a group of guys, and he's basically inherited all my equipment and gear, and he's coaching the system now. And we ended up in kind of a pissing match. It started with me wearing a purple Yoshi shirt. I didn't even know what Yoshi was. It's this gay dinosaur thing.
Yeah, that's from Nintendo.
Okay, so it's
really
a shirt that somebody gave me, and I didn't care if it get tore up because it looked really gay. And then he looked at me. He said, "There's no way I'm letting you beat me while you're wearing that shirt." And I'm like, well, I'm too embarrassed about how I look like under this shirt to take my shirt off. So I'm wearing it. And that was about 25 minutes total. We went at it mostly with those whip sticks. Those are 1/2-inch sticks. Okay, that stick will shatter a finger, or it'll shatter the side of your skull, or it'll shatter your jaw. But it won't break main bones.
It'll break ribs, apparently.
Right. So it's not going to break your leg bones. It's not going to break your forearm bone, but it will break stuff smaller than that. Generally, a stick will break a bone that's this rattan stick, since it's flexible, will break a bone that's thinner than it is, or about the same thickness. He also had the same thin stick, and he's a lefty. So he took a whole lot of punishment on his left, and I had a very hard time defending my head and my shoulder because he's a lot taller than I am. He came off from the newer assembly line, and he's a lefty. So when I'm going for those shots, I'm banking on trying to duck his head stroke or put my left hand up in front of it or fade out of the way and take it on my shoulder, which I managed to do a lot, but not enough. He gave me a pretty bad concussion. He destroyed my brand new fencing mask, and eventually he won when he scored 2 vertical strokes that came right down on my shoulder, because even though I've gotten fat, I still have skinny shoulders. I still have the same shoulders I had when I was 144 pounds. And my nerves and bones are exposed there, and he came right down on it, and after the second shot, I couldn't feel my right hand anymore. So then I took a knee and surrendered. So he won that. I intentionally, I could have tried to win that fight in a couple of different ways, but I wanted to try to win it in the ugliest, most attritive way possible, because I just wanted to see how much balls this young man had. I mean, he endured a tremendous amount of pain. Every time I hit him as hard as I possibly could. And then finally, right before he caught me in my shoulder, I hit him, and his shirt was starting to tear in half. I'd torn his shirt in half, like in 2 different spots. I hit him so hard that it really sounded like slapping a steak on a granite countertop. And he just squinted. His eyes just got narrower, and he just kept on coming. And my shoulder blew out on that shot. I felt my delts just all balled up on that. So I knew that was my last shot at full power I was going to be able to hit him with. And then I tried to close with him. And when I tried to close with him, he knew what was up. He knew there was something the matter. So he had finishing instinct, which is what I wanted to see. I wanted to see if he could take a terrible beating and if he had instinct to finish me.
And he did, I think, both of those things.
Yeah, yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He's a really conscientious guy. The last time we fought with sticks, we did a type of point fighting, and he gave me a concussion, and he put a knot on the side of my head through the fencing mask. And I retired early because I wasn't going to do much of the boxing. And, I was taking my time getting my braces off and stuff. And he came into the house to check on me to make sure I wasn't in a coma or something like that. He was worried. So he's a good guy, but he's got the tenacity he needs. So
it's good. I've seen a little bit of video from that fight, and it matches to the outcome, and at least in terms of Sean's injuries there. I saw you chasing him across the field.
I pissed him off because I'm normally a pretty cagey fighter. I'm not hyper aggressive. I'll try to play possum and then leap in on the guy if he's too much for me to handle at the outer range. But that was Sean's turf. He's a Christian, I'm a heathen, and it started pouring down rain as soon as we started to fight. So I felt like Thor was calling to me, and I felt like I had to make this guy back up on his own turf, and that pissed him off. So he dished out what he needed to when the time came.
All right, looking through my collection of carnage pictures here, there are a couple here that I don't know if they're related to stick fighting, but you're showing your left thumb and your ankle. Your thumb has got the thumbnail is all black, and your ankle is bruised down at the bottom.
The thumbnail was from fighting with those oak short swords. I lost that. I thought I was going to lose that thumbnail. Yes, I did lose the thumbnail. That thumbnail ended up peeling off, but the next one grew in just fine. The sprained ankle was actually from doing a cross step. I was cross stepping to the outside instead of doing a C-step, which I should have done, in a knife fight. It was with dull knives. Chuck and I were fighting with dull knives. And I stepped across his ankle with my forefoot and then landed on the side of my foot and didn't want to go down. I still had that boxing mentality. You don't go down, you never go down. And that did a comprehensive tear of the entire sock of ligature around that ankle, and you see the deforming hump on the top of the foot. That was a really bad sprain. Now I sprain that ankle probably between 2 and 6 times a year. It just doesn't bother me as much, and I go with it. If I start to fall, I just fall and I let the ankle roll over. If it pops, I don't fight it. I just start going flat-footed. But during this fight, I finished that fight with that sprained ankle, and I continued to fight using a coiled foot and flexing it and further tearing all of that. So I was actually hobbling around for quite a while after that.
Yeah. That looks bad. That's about all the pictures I have, James. So, and I'm trying to think back about stories I've read and if there's any other ones you want to talk about. And videos. There's a lot of video out there, I think, of like you and Corey and I don't know who else. Oh, Damien. I don't know if people are aware, but I'll try to link some of it.
Yeah, there's more machete video than stick video. Let me tell you a story about Chesapeake, Virginia.
Okay.
That'd be good. In the Winter of a Fighting Life, there's a picture where I'm holding the guy's hand.
Yeah, you're holding it up. Yeah, that's in Modern Agonistics too. I think it's in both. Yeah. That's
John Bosch. We had fought in Chesapeake, Virginia on Big Al's Pick Your Fights promotions. And Adam Swindler was matched up with Don Plott, and they had a really ugly stick fight. The rednecks in the crowd really roared and loved it when Adam picked up Don and did a judo throw on him, which was against the rules, but he got a lot of points in the crowd for that. The next fight up was Charles and this Washington, D.C. Capitol policeman. He's a cop. It's this big, buff Filipino-American guy. He's a really nice guy, he's a classy guy, very muscular, and he was highly trained with a stick, but didn't have a lot of fight experience. He was matched up with Charles, who didn't have so much experience at this time, because this is back in 2007, I think. And Charles asked me what to do. He was kind of intimidated by that guy, and I said, look, he's not wearing a glove on his stick hand, which means he hasn't done a lot of sparring. He's afraid to let go of the stick. His forearm is going to burn out because he's going to squeeze that stick too hard because he's afraid he's not going to hold on to it. And he had these high-flying techniques I did. I said, and he's a muscle guy, so he's going to gas. I said, so just go out there the first round and make him gas out. Well, Charles goes out there and just leaves his hand down and his stick down and talks to the guy and walks around while the guy whips him horribly with his stick, stripes him like a tiger. Charles had a shirt on, a sleeveless shirt, but it was in shreds when he was done. And the first round, he just took it, and we'd walk up to the guy and he'd push the guy. The second round, they go out, and this guy does one of his high-flying techniques but doesn't come through with it. So Charles hangs his head out, and the guy doesn't go for the bait. So Charles knows that he's gassed out. So he just walks up to him, takes a stroke, shoves him into the corner, and whoops him like he's a servant strapped to a post for 30 seconds straight. And the crowd was just roaring. It was disgusting. It was so that fight was a draw. Okay,
Oh,
it was because we just did 2-round fights. Then John Bosch and I were both cornering then, and we go out to fight. And I'd seen John and I both fought some of the same guys, and John hit harder than me, and I had better movement than him. And the skill level was about the same. I liked his technique better in the fight. He looked at me. He said, "We're going to have a pretty fight, right? We're not going to be doing that ugly shit that those two guys just did, right?" I said, "Yeah, we'll get pretty." So we did. We moved around and tried to hurt each other. He ripped my thigh open, just like I did with Charles and the drunken Agon, and it was bleeding. It was like a channel of blood.
Oh.
Okay? I mean, he hit really hard. And then he broke my right forefinger between the first knuckle and the middle knuckle. And the referee, who was John's coach, he was a Filipino guy who was John's coach, the referee got us together, and he was telling John, and he said, "I'm going to have to give it to James because I moved more and I played defense more." And I told him, I said, "No." I said, "He broke my finger with his first stroke." I said, "I had a broken hand coming right out of the gate. If this would have been without gloves on, I don't think I could have lasted this long because we were wearing gloves, and he still broke my finger. Might have been a compound fracture." He said, "Well, you raise his hand." I'm not going to raise his hand. So I raised his hand. Wow. Because we're trying to do this appreciating what would happen if we didn't have the gear on. We didn't want just to become a pillow fight. So you have to have a certain amount of honor in it. So that was and when we went to the 7-Eleven across the street, we hauled all this gear, and Charles and I are in there with sleeveless shirts on, and we looked like we'd been in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
And these black dudes walk in, and the one guy looks at me, and then he looks at Charles. He said, "Good, Googa Mooga, what you boys been into?" He said, you all running from lions and tigers or what?" So we just had a gentlemanly disagreement a little while ago with some sticks, and he's like, "You all were too much." Well, the funny thing is I got for my dinner, I got a Ben & Jerry's ice cream. I figured it would be something with a lot of calories, and I could use it to ice down my broken finger. I had a doctor there check it out, and he said, "It's definitely broken. I can move the bones, clean break, but keep it wrapped." And we're sitting in the room, and Adam's the junior guy, so he got the floor. Charles and I got the beds. And I'm sitting on my bed, and I'm trying to spoon out this rock hard ice cream with this broken hand, and it's not working. And they just started laughing at me. So that was, that was a good time. It was one of the best times we had.
That sounds like fun.
We do stick fighting stories. I'll tell you about the other Virginia stick fighting thing that we traveled to, which was even better. Okay.
Okay. You want to save that one for next time?
Apparently, we're just scratching the surface here on stick fighting stuff because my mind started to churn. And I saw your little one crawling on your lap there.
Yeah, so, she's all right. Yeah.
We're going to have to go in a little bit. But I'd like you to ask me a question about stick fighting first, so it's just not me telling stories.
Oh, I have asked you many questions. I've looked at all these pictures and stuff. I think this is very girlish of me, but what interests me is that the way that you guys would make your own weapons and armor. I like reading about that you have these sticks and you wrap them, and then I don't know, like you were describing the wiffle balls. I mean, what's going through your mind?
We made a trident out of an oak bow staff, and we used baling wire to make the two extending forks on the side. Early on, we made our armor out of this old cowhide that my father brought home from West Virginia after he sold tractor trailer training to some hillbilly, and the guy tore his cowhide down off his wall and gave it to my father. And we used early on, that's what we used for neck guards and for like thigh guards, because we were actually fighting with heavy composite weapons that we had made that were made out of hard woods, oak and pine and ash. The protection started to go away when we started to go just to rattan. For one thing, we found out that the rattan bruised you up just as badly as the oak, but it didn't break your bones as easily. And the broken bones sidelines you. We wanted to be able to get more people into it. And the rattan lasted longer. The oak, at a certain point, will just splinter apart and shatter. We decided for those two reasons and for the fact that there were standardized sports with these sticks that people conducted, a couple of different leagues, where we were hoping to draw some people from to do some cross training and some charity events, and we did. We got some weak half guys to actually fight in our events. Once we went to using rattan, and then as a secondary set, we would use the old agonistic weapons, and our standard short sword turned out to be something that was quite improvised. We go to the dollar store and get two plungers. You get two plungers, and you stack them on top of each other, oddly, and you cut a circle around the base of the cup. So you leave the plug on and you reverse the sticks and stack them and tie them together. So on one end you have a rubber point, and on the other hand you have a rubber pommel. And then you can lace them together as two stacked sticks so that they'll stay stacked, and then tape them on top of that. And we would use black electrical tape to tape on top of that. And take the two cups, tape them together, and then lace them and wire them and tape them on as handguards. And they made really good little gladiatorial shields or swords that handled just like a short cutlass. And they were very durable with shields. They were heavy, but they weren't so long that they were going to break big bones or anything. They'd break a finger if you let it get caught between one of these things and the shield. We used those things for a long while. I think there's some videos somewhere of some of those being used. But that was a very handy training weapon that once you use, we use jute twine. Jute twine is the best thing to use for your composite practice weapons because it's actually soft and you can compress it and use it to bind well. And it's not abrasive. It's not going to cut people in case it pokes through the tape that you cover it with. And it also gives a little bit of a cushion for the stick and for your bone. So for a short training sword, that's one good thing. We made all kinds of shields out of different things. I once stacked stovetop burner plates and wired them together and made little punch shields out of those. Then got even cheaper, and we would use baling wire for the handles. I made really good plates. I made really good punching shields out of unwrapped packages of plastic party plates that I just covered with tape and put wire over the front of them and let it back to a wire handguard. I once used one of these cheesy little shields and a rattan stick that had a turkey baster stacked on the end of it to make it like a practice war club. And I took that against a guy that was a Kenjutsu instructor, and he had a hickory katana, and I won. With this, basically, he had what represented the most expensive sword in history.
Yeah, the dollar store armory.
Right, and I had this thing, and the reason why I won this, I fenced with this guy with these hickory katanas quite a few times, and I could not touch him, katana to katana. But he's a guy that practiced with one length of weapon. It's like taking a boxer and putting him against a kickboxer, and he's not used to getting kicked from that. He's not used to getting kicked. Well, it was the same thing there. This guy didn't know how to read my range changes. You know, he's used to doing everything on the end of the sword. Yeah, so I took that European peasant weapon out there and took out the samurai with it. So I felt pretty good about that. How the session ended, it was actually a friendly sparring session that became kind of heated. How it ended was he was in such a panic, he kept backing up, and then his sneakers caught in the bottom of the fencing on the basketball court that we were, and he was actually pinned. He was trapped by his own sneaker against the fence. And Chuck was telling me, whoop him, whoop him, whoop him. And I was like, no. I said, that's not right. You know, cause this guy took it easy on me when we were doing it with his weapons. And we actually had to help him get caught loose from the fence. So it would have been a great, like peasant on samurai murder scenario there. Out there by the fence in the garden, in the Bushido garden.
Well, what's your favorite weapon? What do you feel most comfortable with?
Bowie knife, absolutely Bowie knife. I'm comfortable using a Bowie knife against a gun. If somebody's got a handgun, especially if they can't shoot any better than I can shoot with a handgun, I'm definitely comfortable with a Bowie knife. I used to be able to hit a tree from 5 paces. I would aim at 12-inch pine trees because they would heal up pretty good. They'd bleed sap and plug up the hole. And I could consistently hit them with the Bowie knives I bought when I was 16, which is a 2-pound Western Bowie knife made in America. And I would even stick the brass handguards into the tree. So even if I hit you with the back end of this thing, it's punching a hole in your head. And I know I can hit core. I know I could hit along from the groin to between the eyes. I know I can hit that that right there, because I always practiced on a small thing. And in a self-defense situation, I would only throw it if I was 1 pace away. Okay, so I know I'm going to hit him. And as far as using it, it's just a perfect length of knife. I'm really good at that length. I can still lunge off of my left foot, and I cut down trees with that Bowie knife. I cut a ham in half with one chop. I cut a 5-pound frozen chuck roast in half with one chop with that thing.
Yeah, wow.
And that's always
handy in the kitchen.
It's in my bed, and because in the kitchen there's always a butcher knife.
But handy in the kitchen, even in battle or in the kitchen.
Yeah, well, the Bowie knife is based on a butcher knife. That's what it was. Jim Bowie modified a butcher knife.
Okay.
And some rich dude ran him through the lung. I think it was the lung. He ran him through with a small sword at the sandbar fight outside of New Orleans. And then Jim Bowie, who was a big guy, grabbed the guy and pulled him towards him, jammed his butcher knife all the way into the guy's guts under his rib cage. And when somebody asked him how he finished the guy, he said, "I twisted it until his heartstrings sang." or I twisted it until I heard his heartstrings sing. Was how he said it. Geez. Yeah, so Bowie knife is really great for close quarters. If the dude's got a smaller knife, you're just murdering him. Knife to knife. If the other guy's knife is twice your size and you both know what you're doing with it, the guy with the little knife is just a piece of meat. He's dead. It's not as bad with swords. Once you get to something that's as long as your arm, you could take a different length of weapon against each other. But if you're not armored and you've got two different lengths of knives, the guy with the short knife, if you're equally matched, you're just done. Yeah. So the Bowie knife is like a capital knife. It's at the top of the food chain as far as knives go.
Well, thank you, James. I think that was really good.
I felt kind of weird talking about Jim Bowie in the sandbar fight with your beautiful little girl sitting on your lap right there. But, hopefully she didn't hear any of it.
No, she can't hear. All right, that was episode 29, Stories About Stick Fighting. By request on Twitter, somebody tweeted that I would listen to a whole episode of Stick Fighting stories. So there you go. You got it.
We'll meet again under the sun. Every 12 minutes and another one's gone. This meat's in your makeup, this flesh is on your lips. As a nuclear warhead explodes